All right, so what are we working on here? It looks like we're working on the workshop toggle text app. That's what we're working on here today. And if this is your very first time joining this channel, my name is Rob. I'm a coding instructor for PreCodeCamp, and we are going through some of the freeCodeCamp modules, and this happens to be in React, which happens to be my favorite thing to kind of talk about and go through. And we're going to come at it from an instructor's point of view. You're going to learn some things in this video, and if you are trying to attempt it yourself, you may get stuck. And so we're going to go through some of the sticking points in this. I haven't gone through this myself, but we're going to go through it live together here in this video. And if you could just do one thing here for us, is hit that like button. It really helps out that YouTube algorithm. It's free, doesn't cost you anything. And if you are wanting to go the extra mile, leave a comment down below on how did you find this video? Maybe where are you getting stuck in the free CodeCamp modules? And maybe we can make some more videos that will help you out and get you out of the weeds. Okay. All right. With that being said, let's go ahead and do a real quick overview on what we're going to be building in this. All right. Should be fun. Right, so this is what we're going to be making it looks like, a little show message, and we can toggle it and hide it. And a couple things that I'm noticing on here is that when we click on it, notice that the text in between the button is changing. And then we also get some text down here to display as well. Some things are going on behind the scenes. We're definitely going to talk about them. And this is a real good, easy use case scenario for somebody trying to use some sort of toggle, okay, where it's either on or off. And, a lot of times when I'm teaching this in front of the class is we talk about other uses that we see every day on a login screen, right? Hey, are you signing up or are you logging in? And this is a real great use case to know, hey, which one should I show? Should I show the message? Should I show the login? Or should I show the sign up? And so very easy in React to kind of make this switch happen. Okay. So anyways, let's go ahead and hit the start coding and see what we have to do for step number one. All right. So we are on step number one here, and it says that in the previous lectures, we learned a little bit how to utilize the UseState hook. And for this workshop, we're going to be creating an app that will show and hide a piece of text on the screen when that user clicks the button. That's what we just got done seeing. We've been provided with boilerplate code to include CSS. Thank you so much, freeCodeCamp. So that way we can just focus on the React logic, which makes that really nice. And so it says here to begin, we need to return a div element inside of the toggle app. So here's the toggle app, and make sure that the ID has toggle container. And before I do get started with this, also notice part of that boilerplate code is we are importing a UseState. I'm going to remind us again, once we start utilizing UseState, because you can't just use UseState right out of the box. You need to import it first, and it has already done that for us. Okay, here we want to do a return. So remember when we're talking about JavaScript and this being a JSX file, and we need to export or we need to return a single JSX element, okay? And so in this case here, it wants us to return a div. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the div. And then I'm going to give it the ID here of toggle container. All right. So we see it pop up over here because we already have the CSS kind of defining this class. And I believe that's all it needs for this part here. I did put the parentheses on here. If you're wondering why I put the parentheses on here, if we are ever going to hit the enter key and kind of scaffold the HTML, the parentheses are going to be necessary. So that way it kind of knows, hey, we're going to go from parenthesis to parenthesis for returning this as a single JSX element. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and check our code, run the test, and congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. All right. So step number two here, it says that inside the toggle container element, which is that div that we just got done doing, let's go ahead and create a button element and give it the ID of toggle button. So again, I'm just going to do open and closing tags so I don't forget. And then inside here, we're going to put the message. And for the ID, we're going to set that equal to toggle button. And so now everything's looking styled. However, nothing's going to be working quite yet. We haven't done that logic. Okay. All right. This should work for step number two. And congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. Okay. So we are on step number three. It says below the button element. Let's go ahead and add a paragraph element with the ID of message. And then the text needs to say, I love freeCodeCamp. All right, too easy. Let's go ahead and start off with that paragraph tag, open and closing tag so we don't forget. And then in here, we can just say, I love freeCodeCamp with an exclamation mark. And then we come over here to the paragraph opening tag, and we want the ID to be message. All right, let's go ahead and check our code here. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next step. All right, we are on step number 4 with toggle a text app for freeCodeCamp. And now we're finally getting into UseState. It says that in prior lectures, we have learned on how to create state variables by utilizing UseState, the UseState hook, and destructuring. And I kind of want to take this time right now and talk a little bit about the destructuring and how this is working, because what I want you to think about is that UseState is like a function. It is returning an array worth of information, and we are plucking things out here. And I created this little JS fiddle here. Let me go to it. And I have this simple function here, right? It's called two random numbers, and we have let num1 and num2. They're generating a number here, and we are returning them in an array. And so this is kind of what I want you to think about with React. It is a simple function, and it returns two things. In this case here, if I were to store this in a single variable, and I run this, I'm console logging it, I'm getting a 9 and a 6, okay? So after it ran the function, it returned an array with two random numbers inside the array. Now, what if I wanted to utilize destructuring and give them their own variable names like I have right here? So let me uncomment these out. And so again, I'm trying to let you relate this to UseState. On UseState as a function, it returns an array. And here we are plucking things out of the array by utilizing destructuring. If I were to run this, we now get 5, 6. And so no longer is it in an array, it is stored in individual variables, okay? So that's what I kind of wanted you to get out of the UseState. Now, I also want to reference the documentation of React and what is UseState. And so I have this one here kind of pulled up. And the way that UseState works, and I want you to kind of follow along with these patterns here, is this is almost like the variable name. And the very first thing that we destructure, it is read only. You can't update it with a simple equal sign. And so we have this function here, which is set age. So think of it as UseState as a function. It returns something that is read only. And then it also returns a function that we are able to update it. And every single thing that you see inside of the parentheses here, this is what we are initializing the variable to be set as. So you can see here, it takes the parameter. It is the initial state, which is the value you want it to be. And then it returns here the initial state that you've passed in, along with the set function. And this set function allows you to update the state. So why do we have UseState? Well, this gives React a way to refresh a component and hydrate it with information that has been new, right? So if we have something that's new that the screen needs to refresh on, and in our case, it's a button click, we're going to be introducing a button click, and it's going to be updating the state on it. Okay, so that's a real quick once over on UseState. Let's go ahead and take a look at the task that we have to do with this and see how we're utilizing it. Okay, so it gave us the example here. Again, bringing this up is the variable naming convention. It's going to be very similar to what we see here in the documentation. If this variable name was age, we have an age, and then we have a set age. Notice that it is the variable name, and then we have a set variable name. That is very common practice on what we see with React. Name, set name. If this is a to-do, this is going to be set to-dos, okay? And so the way that we're going to utilize UseState is a very common practice. Again, const, and then it's going to be square brackets, and then inside there we have two things that we need to do. One is the variable name, and then we have the function name. And then we're going to set that equal to UseState, which is a function. And what do we want to initialize that variable to? Okay, so in this case here, we have a name, and it is being updated. It's being initialized as Rob. And so if it detects a change in this variable, then React knows that it needs to refresh the page and display it properly in the DOM. Okay. All right. Now let's go to the freeCodeCamp portion. Now it further goes on here and says the convention for naming state variables, we're going to follow this. And that's exactly what I told you in the previous slide. We have an example and then we have set example. The UseState returns an array with two values, the first value being the current state, the second value being the set function. And so it says create a new state variable with invisible and set invisible. And remember that in order to utilize array destructuring, make sure we take a look at the example. Okay. And we want to initialize the use state to false. Okay. So let's put what they told us into code. So the very first thing is you want to initialize the variable. We're going to utilize destructuring with the square brackets. And then we're going to do is visible and set is visible. Okay. Well, what do we want to set that equal to? Well, we want to set that equal to the function of useState, the hook, and then it gets left and right parentheses. Now it says it wants us to initialize this to false. And so this is going to be a Boolean, right? And there we go. That is what it needs. And then I'll put a semicolon in here for good practice. But this should satisfy step number 4, where we initialized it. We are destructuring, and we're utilizing that good naming convention that they gave us, but it's still good naming convention, is visible and set is visible. And then we're setting that equal to the function of useState, and we are initializing it to be false. And the whole reason that we can utilize useState, again, remember, we are importing it up here at the very top. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. All right. So now we're on step number 5. It says, now that you created the isVisible state variable, now it's time to start using it. So it lets us know that in prior lectures, you've learned about conditional rendering. And this is where we're going to be utilizing the double and sign to conditionally render a piece of text. And it provides you with some example code here. And the thing that I really want us to kind of pick up on this is we are in the React portion here. We're in the return section. And anytime we want to inject any JavaScript, we have to utilize those double curly brackets. Now, the way that you are to read this is the following. It's first going to take a look at message. Okay. And it is evaluating it for truthy or falsiness. And I kind of have this JS fiddle set up to help us out and remember what does certain things, truthy or falsy, represent when we are looking at this. But the way that we're going to read this is if this is true on the left side of this and sign, then this part over here is going to get rendered. Okay. So it is taking a look at it and taking a look, in this case here, at the message. And if there is a message, then it's going to show it. And the JS fiddle that I have set up here is, if you remember, we have this Boolean. If you remember, we have this Boolean that we are able to utilize. You know, this Boolean function allows us to evaluate what's inside these parentheses to tell you whether or not something is true or false. And so I put some comments in here. You may want to take a screenshot of this, but if we're remembering back to some of the fundamentals, an empty string is false. Okay. If we have 0 in there, it gets rendered as false. And null, undefined, false, those are all going to represent false. So as long as we have text coming in as a message, then hey, that's going to return true. And so when we're looking at this over here, you know, you might relate it to maybe like a guard, right? A guard's at the door and it's saying, hey, if this thing is true over here, then I'm going to go ahead and show you this over here. So how are we going to relate this to our stuff here? So it says the first step here is we need to render this paragraph element only when the is visible variable, right, that we created up above is true. Right now, it is naturally false. Okay. So what I expect to have happen here is once we render this conditionally, it should go away. We should no longer see I love freeCodeCamp. And I told you from before is we need to start off with those curly brackets. So we need to have curly bracket on the left. We need to have curly bracket on the right. And what goes on the left side of here is what we are trying to evaluate. This is our guard, right? Our guard at the door. And we're saying, hey, is visible. We need to know what you are. If you are true, then we're going to show it. If not, we're going to hide it. Okay. And so if I come back up here, let me go ahead and scroll up here. If I change this initialized state to true, notice that the message shows up. If I do an empty string, it goes away, right? If I put something in here, notice that it is now shown. So again, it is evaluating the true and false of whatever state variable it is evaluating, and it is going to render a true or false. And so we're going to set this up to false, and then we should be able to take a look at our code, check it, and we got the congratulations, and we're moving on to the next step here. Okay, so this is conditional rendering, utilizing, hey, if it's true on the left, hey, let's show it on the right. You see it a lot in React, just like this. And we also see ternaries as well. And I don't know if we're going to get into that in this or not, but we'll see. All right, moving on to the next step. All right, so step number 6, it looks like we already did this one in the previous one, and I didn't know that they were going to show us this, but it just wants us to change this one to true. We kind of took it a step further by adding in text in there, and now we get to see the I love freeCodeCamp because it is set to true. Let's go and check our code. There we go. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next one. All right, step number 7 is undoing what we already did. Let's change this to false, and we should see it go away down here. We're going to check our code. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, so step number 8 here, it wants us to create a function called handle toggle visibility. And I believe that's all it wants us to do here, but we want to make sure we use that keyword function. And there we go. And this will be responsible for flipping it to the opposite of either turned on or turned off. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and check our code. I might have misspelled it. Let me double check. Yeah, I definitely misspelled it. Checking our code. There we go. All right, cool. Moving on to the next one. All right, so we're on step number 9. I might have done this a little bit differently. If I'm programming this in front of the class, is I typically set the button up to call the function, and then I test the function out and everything. But let's go ahead and go with what they're saying to go with. And it says, as mentioned earlier, the set function is responsible for updating the state. And this is one of the things that confuses students all the time when they're learning how to do React, is they simply want to come in here and do the following, like is, and I forgot the variable that we're calling it, is visible. And they want to set this to the opposite of what is visible is. And so the problem with this is whenever we create a UseState variable, we have something that is the read-only portion, and you can't update it or reassign it. Okay, you have to use the function in order to do so. And so if you're thinking this way, we need to, somehow think about how do we change our thinking, our logic in this, and say, hey, you know what? This needs to be the setter to this, and this is where we are going to put the closing parenthesis on, and this is what we need to use in order to update a UseState variable. Okay, we have to utilize this hook for React to know, hey, we just changed some data. We changed a UseState variable, and we need you to refresh this page here, or refresh this component here only, and give it the new information and judge everything based off the new information. That's what we're essentially doing with this. Now, our button click is still not going to work because we haven't set up the on-click event yet, but I'm assuming that's coming up here in the next logic here. But let's go ahead and check our code, and we got the congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. So let's go ahead and move on to it. Step number 10, it says, note that there is a useEffect hook that was added to this, and it is calling the function that we just made. And so it says we're going to learn more about useEffect hook in the future, in a future lecture or workshop. But now's a good time to see the updated is visible value. So this is what it was kind of saying, is that, hey, notice that we have the message. It showed up, right? But if we look up here, it's false. Okay. Well, why did it get shown then? Well, if we take a look at the use effect, and the way that this use effect is working is it says, hey, once the page gets totally done loading, I want you to go ahead and call this function here. Okay. And with these square brackets that we see right here, it says, hey, I only want this to happen one time, and that's when the page is done loading. Okay. If we take a look at what it's wanting us to do here is console log the value of is visible. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So this forced a total refresh of the page, and we got in our console a false. But here's the problem is, hey, this thing right here, it's showing. It's set to true. Why is that happening? And so the thing that you have to take into consideration is whenever we are setting a variable in React, it is doing it asynchronously. And I get this all the time with students in the classroom, and they just throw a console log in there right after they change this, and it takes time. Okay. We can't await this. There's no way to do that. And in the course, we teach them about the Google Chrome extension that they have for React. And we're able to go into it, and then we're able to see it. Okay. And so that's why I'm always telling students, hey, if you're trying to console log a variable that is changing in state, you're probably not going to get what you are expecting. And that's just because this part right here, it takes time. And maybe it's going to explain that to us in the next step. But it said open up the console. You'll notice that the value is not what you expect it to be. We expected it to be true, but right here it's saying false, and that's why. Timing. We're calling it too soon. Is there a way to see that with console log? There is. I don't know if we're going to get to it in this one, but it might be for another video. So let's go and check our code. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next step. All right, so step 11, it kind of goes over the same exact thing that I told you in the previous step. It says if you looked at the console, you might be surprised to see that the value was false instead of true. This is happening because React doesn't immediately update state. And I told you that it happens asynchronously, like it doesn't happen immediately. Okay. The state will only be updated the next rendered cycle. And so it's a common mistake for developers new to React to place a console log statement right after the set function. And like I told you, we have students that do that too. And so it's something to be aware of when you're building out your React applications. And like I said, in the full class that we have, we always talk about the Google extension or the Chrome extension that will definitely help you be able to visualize your state, and you can take a look at it rather than trying to do all these console logs. All right, it says it wants us to remove that and then check our code. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next step. All right, so step number 12 here. It looks like they did remove the use effect, and they didn't let us know, but the use effect is now gone. And now we want to utilize the handle toggle visibility function all on our own. And we want to take advantage of the on click. Okay. And so it provides us with some example code. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we bring your attention to here is that the on click, it is camel cased. Okay. And so what does that look like on ours? Let's go down to our button and let's go ahead and do the on click. And we're going to set that equal to, and then we're going to do the curly brackets. Now, one of the things that I always telling students is like, hey, we don't need when we're talking about the function here, we don't need the left and right parentheses. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in an endless loop, I believe. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. And so we named our function up here, handle toggle visibility. Okay. So we just want to name it. We don't want to put in the parentheses in here. Okay. And so you can see that toggling the button, it does work. But sometimes I get students that will put in the left and right parentheses here, and then we get into so many re-renders. We get an error. Okay. So you don't want to put the parentheses on there. You just want to have the simple button and the on click, and then it should work just fine. Okay. So that should be step number 12. And let's see if that is anything else we have to do. Let's check our code. Running the test. Congratulations. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, so step number 13, it says it would be nice to dynamically show the words show message or hide message based upon the state of is visible. Okay, so it says earlier we reviewed about the inline conditional rendering and where we're talking about hide and show. And it gives an example here of is menu visible question mark. So this is the ternary, okay? And it's doing an evaluation. Hey, is this true or false? If it's true, then it's going to go down this path right here, whatever follows that question mark. If it's false, it's going to go whatever is after the colon. And so what it is wanting us to do down here is show message, hide message, okay? So we want to base that off of is visible, okay? So we're going to do the curly brackets here. We're going to do is visible, and then we're going to do the question mark, okay? So if it is being shown, meaning like if it's true, that means the message is there. So that means we want to hide the message, okay? Otherwise, we want to show message, okay? And I think I can maybe make this a little more readable here, and it should work just fine. Okay, so it's evaluating is visible. Right now, it's saying, okay, it is false. So that means we're not going to go to this one. We're going to go to the other one. Okay, so if it is true, it's always going to go to the one next to the question mark. All right, let's go ahead and test this out. Hide message, show message, hide message. All right, it looks like it works. Our text works. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and check our code. Tests are running. Congratulations, our code has passed. All right, that's good. All right, you powered through that one, right? We got to the end. We were able to utilize a couple of the conditional renderings, and we were introduced to UseState in this one. I tell you, it is going to take you practice and doing some more challenges over and over, because just this one module is not going to bless you off in knowing how to utilize UseState. There's several other cases, obviously, but this was a great introduction. There's several more challenges that I would like to do, or that we do in class, that I would love you all to do as well. But anyways, thanks again for watching, and hopefully this video helped connect some of the dots when it comes to React and UseState. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for liking, thanks for subscribing. Take care.